How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
Good, mate. Good, mate.
Yeah, we're gonna wait for this thing to fully load before making any assumptions about whether we're online or not. Um, but yeah, otherwise,
It says
today's
we're online.
episode. Alrighty. So
Yeah.
tonight's episode is a very, very important episode. It has to do with a topic that oftentimes is very, very taboo amongst men. In particular, we as Black men have never really had healthy examples of people discussing this issue with us in a very constructive manner and in a very helpful manner. So today, we will be talking about mental health and why mental health matters. We wait, I think one of you are playing the video in the background. We are fortunate enough to be living in a generation where mental health is at the forefront of discussing issues in the community, as we oftentimes like to refer to ourselves. But more often than not, mental health is a soundbite. You know, it's that thing
Yeah.
where, you know, whenever we hear of someone who took their own life, or someone who had an episode with their mental health. A friend of yours will always say mental health matters. Hey, we should really focus on mental health. And all of these sound bites that sound cool, that are great slogans on social media, aren't really moving us forward in the conversation of how it is that we deal with mental health, and in particular, how men deal with mental health, having grown up in a system of patriarchy that, let alone, you know, discourage the seeking help, doesn't even encourage expressing or feeling at all. So
Yeah.
these are the things that we're going to speak about today. But before we start, Tammy just has a message for us regarding the, you know, unacceptable, continuously growing levels of gender-based violence in South Africa. So Tammy, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I think it just serves as a reminder for why we're having these conversations. Because we're having these conversations because just last week, Asithandile Zozo, a 19-year-old student from the Eastern Cape, was due to fly to Wits University to continue her studies and continue her year. And that trip to really just fulfill her potential was cut short because her ex-boyfriend stabbed her several times and killed her. 2 weeks ago, we found out that 5 women were killed in succession and buried by 2 men at sugarcane field in KZN.
So there's a bit of feedback on your video. We're hearing doubles for some reason.
Oh.
Maybe lower the volume a bit.
Are you still hearing doubles now?
No, we're good now.
No, it's all right for me. I'm good.
Yeah, I was wondering what was happening. Yeah, man, just back at it. Like 2 weeks ago, 5 women were found buried at a local sugarcane field in KZN. And they were murdered in succession by 2 men. And one of the men last Monday, was found hanging in a prison shower, took his own life, and thus preventing any kind of situation where the families could be retributed and justice could come to pass. Around this time, we're also going to be remembering, I would say, the anniversary of the death of Uyinene, who died last year around this time. I think Frank was just mentioning before we called that in about 10 days' time would be that, you know, a year since we found out that she was indeed killed. And she was indeed killed by this man who worked at this particular post office. And it's sad because a year since her death, a year since those protests, a year since that movement, that wave of activism, the same has continued. And men have continued to hold on to our sense of misogyny, our sense of privilege and entitlement to the bodies of women, to the extent that we kill women. And it's saddening. And I just want to say, this is why we're having these conversations, because we know that we're not going to reach all men, but the men that we reach must reach more men in their communities. This kind of reflection needs to go viral, because we have blood on our hands, and the blood continues to spill over and over again. The more we ignore the situation, the more we're silent and ambivalent and apathetic about femicide, the more we distance ourselves from those killers, the more we say those guys are the crazy guys and they're not us, without reflecting on how we continuously contribute to the perpetuation of this kind of violence eventually. It's just like we have a hell of a lot of work to do still. That's just all I want to say about that. And we must just always spare a thought for the women that continue dying and hold men accountable around us.
Yeah.
It might be your own friend who does this next time, and it might be your own, a person that you know who got killed. This was a Wits student, and we've been students, all three of us, of its alumni.
Alrighty. Thank you so much, Tammy. Dumi, do you have anything to say regarding these recent events? I mean, there's a reason why our first episode had to do with violence, I suppose. And how do you see that trickling down into all the other conversations that we've had, and how does it link up to the one that we're having tonight before we start with the program?
Yeah, I think, Tammy cited so many scenarios while he spoke, and since Uyinene was murdered, we've had countless women being murdered. And, it's just like a plethora of statistics that you hear about gender-based violence, and how every few seconds a woman is raped, or every few minutes a woman is murdered in South Africa, or the reality that 1 in 3 women is going to be a victim of gender-based violence, or the fact that a woman in South Africa, a girl in South Africa, is more likely to be raped than to receive an education. So I think once again, if we're going to be successful, we need to teach and instill the idea that our daily behaviors contribute to that reality, firstly. But secondly, when it comes to mental health, which is what we're going to be discussing today, we can't continue to, and the reason before I speak, the reason I flag mental health is just because, of the scenarios we've heard this week, I think I know about 3 or 4 scenarios where the man who killed his intimate partner ended up taking his own life, right? And I think we do this thing as men where we only begin to take our mental health seriously when it's too late, or we only even begin to have those conversations, like you said, Bongani, earlier, that mental health is a talking point, but it only becomes a talking point when, when things get dire. So I just think we need to sort of imbibe the habit, or adopt the habit of taking our mental health more seriously, more quickly, and realize that it's our jobs to do the work, and no amount of women dying is going to catalyze that. We have to do it ourselves, because what more will it take, and how many more murders will it take for us to take gender-based violence more seriously? So we need to understand that gender-based violence is our problem to fix, and that we shouldn't be waiting for George Floyd level outrage for things to change on just the behalf of things. So yeah, we need to adopt the mantle. We need to pick up the mantle and do the work ourselves, because clearly there's no amount of outrage, or there isn't a gruesome enough kind of example of gender-based violence that will catalyze mass action. So
that's so true. It's so true.
Thank you so much, Dumi, and thank you too, Tammy, for starting us off like that. So starting with the business of the day, dealing with mental health. The reason why, as I said earlier on, we're having this discussion is that as men, we need a sort of manifesto-like step-by-step discursive platform to begin this discourse around mental health. We need to be able to put out a message out there that leaves men knowing what the next step is if they're suffering from depression, if they're struggling with anxiety and all of those things. And I just want to give a disclaimer to everyone who's watching and everyone who's listening that none of the participants in this discussion are qualified psychologists or qualified medical professionals in any way. We are three millennial men who are going to be speaking mainly from experience and sort of relaying our observation of the dynamics that affect men and their mental health. Part of that will be, we'll see us also being vulnerable and opening up about our experiences with mental health and some of the healthy coping mechanisms that we've adopted since we realized ourselves that we had struggles with mental health. So to start with the business of the day, the first talking point has to do with, I'll just start off and very bluntly ask you, when did you first realize that you too are capable or are, what's the word? When did you first, I don't want to say when did you first experience your first mental health issue, but when did you first realize that you too could potentially fall prey to your own mental health if you didn't work at it? Was there a very traumatic event? Was it something that happened progressively over time? Was it something that happened peacefully, or was it a violent realization that you had mental health issues that you had to deal with? So I'll start with yourself, Tammy, and then I'll move on to you, Dumi.
Okay. This is a very, very good question. Look, let me dive straight into it. Like, the first time I realized that I definitely have issues to deal with was, I think I was in high school. And at the time it was around grade 11. It was around prelims. I was quite an overachiever in high school, and like I felt like there was I was under so much pressure.
Yeah.
And I think I was also very purposefully like crafting an image of myself to that high school environment, etc.
Yeah.
But like, there was a point where literally things started to go south very, very badly. And, I didn't open up about it at all. I used to have my own little outlet. I'd write like poetry and whatever, and I thought that was pretty like, helpful at the time to just help me cope with whatever I was going through. But again, I didn't even tell anyone about it because I didn't understand it to be a mental health issue. I thought it was stress and, the daily pressures of this and that. And only it caught up with me, like, again, I kept it in. It caught up with me much later in my life, man. Like, maybe around 2016, at the end of that massive second wave of Fees Must Fall. And, I was facing very, very serious academic challenges. And I was about to make the decision to leave school. And once I made that decision, everything around me collapsed, right? From scholarship to my relationship with my family to financial security, everything became supremely precarious. And like, I went through an actual stint of depression. And it was so bad because, again, I had just established a relationship with my wife, with Busi, and like, geez, like the only way I could really cope with it, come out of it again, was through conversations I'd be having with you guys, friends, because I've been lucky enough, and I think, as gents, I think we're lucky enough to understand and just talking through our pain, and understanding, like, by talking through this pain, we're releasing all of this negative and pent up energy, aggression, and whatever insecurities that we have, whatever triggers and that we have, and all those kinds of things that are so inherent in us, because I think we're all broken as men, and there are so many traumas that culminate to a specific rupturing point. And I'm so glad I've never come to a place, Bongs, where it's been a violent rupture necessarily. It's actually been it's been boiling. It would boil and then I'd talk. It would boil, then I'd talk. It would boil and almost boil the pot over, then I'll talk right before that kind of thing happens.
Yeah.
You know, and but like the one thing I want to like guard against as well, because an implication that happens of us not talking about our mental health as men, and us not being trained or socialized in environments where we can embrace being vulnerable, is that there's some kind of passive expectation that women are going to nurse us through our feelings.
Yeah.
So we have a nursing culture that we cultivate, where, you know, we kind of expect our moms to do the work, our sisters, or our women who are women who are our best friends, or our spouses. You know, and I've found myself in many situations where there would be an imbalance of emotional labor between me and Lucy again. Right, where she's doing so much of the heavy lifting of my emotions and my traumas and insecurities that stem from 1996, when she wasn't even around. You know what I'm saying? All the way to like the point that we're at. So it's another thing I want us to guard against, that I think it's important for us as gents, as friends who are men, to talk to each other very deeply and vulnerably about these issues. You know, so that women in our lives aren't the ones to carry our burden over and above carrying theirs, and then turn around to like inflict violence upon them. You know what I mean? Like just like the double, triple burden that women carry, especially our intimate partners, is really damning. But like I think around high school, bro, like was when I started to see again. I'm battling with internal emotions. I'm battling with you know, like with really dire, dark demons that I need to defeat.
Thank you so much, Tammy, for that. Dumi, yours is, I think your story, obviously I'm not gonna let out too much about it, was one that was particularly impactful for my own personal life, because I think you were the first close friend that I've ever had who spoke very openly and candidly about their experiences with mental health at a time when, and this is like 5 years ago, at a time when, let alone understanding mental health as a concept, just as a form of health, was something I had never related to myself until you started normalizing those types of chats around us as guys. So I'm particularly looking forward to, I don't know, you relaying your experiences with mental health, because I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in saying that you've encouraged a lot of us to come out and speak about it.
Absolutely.
So, you know, could you please take it away and tell us, you know, who Dumi is over the last 25 years up until now, and your experiences with mental health?
Thank you. You're so stupid. I love you. Sure. I mean, I think so. I'm going to start off with just like troubles I've had being at war with my own mind before I speak about the point where I realized that there was an issue to fix. I think for as long as I can remembering anything, like I think all my life I've had mental health issues. I was a problem kid with multiple learning disorders, who never class, who was always being scolded by teachers, who didn't really have friends, just like a really, really isolated kid with multiple just multiple, like, who experience multiple difficulties from a learning perspective and a social perspective. But I think for a very, very long time, my mental health wasn't my problem, if you get what I mean. Like Tammy said, now we do the thing of imposing the burden of our mental health on the women around us. In that instance, or in that case, I was 8 years old, so maybe, you know, it made sense back then.
We can forgive you.
I can forgive myself for it, yeah. But I think, yeah, my mental health was never my problem. You know, I was just who I was, right? It's my mother who got called into meetings with my teachers. It's my mother who had to deal with the consequences of my behaviors, because all I know as an 8-year-old is how to be who I am, and I just know everything feels unnecessarily and unfairly difficult for me, right? But I think the point where my mental health began to feel like something that, not that I have control over, but at least that I should have control over, or something that's my burden to fix, is in 2009 when my father died. And just a really, really dark and bizarre period. But I think that's the point. I think the reason I cite that period is because that's the point where, like, suicidal ideation became an issue. That's the point where my mental health genuinely began to impede in the ways I live, right, and enjoy life, in ways I could express. And yeah, I think it got to a point where, and it's sort of been the case for every single mental health breakdown I've had throughout the years. But it's only when things get really, really bad where I realize, okay, no, I should probably get a handle on this or take it seriously. So but I've always wanted to get better, just because it's always felt like there is an alternative to just to my relationship with my mind. And it's always felt like it's always felt like it could be temporary if I did the work. And I'm not sure where that mindset came from, because I know a lot of people feel a lot of men feel hopeless, or a lot of people feel hopeless and feel that, I guess, there's no end in sight, which, you know, there's periods like that. But I think my father's passing is probably the one defining event where I realized that how I relate to my mind is my responsibility. Yes, it's going to be influenced and informed by external factors that I have no control over, but how I choose to, not even choose, but how I relate to my mind is it's a dynamic that I must do the work of informing. And yeah, like I said, just because that was the point where, you know, if I didn't make that intervention for myself, I wouldn't be here, right? So yeah, I think I didn't make the active decision to seek therapy back then, but I think my mother put me in therapy just because it was probably the logical thing to do. A kid's parent dies, put him in therapy, you know, it's what you do. So luckily there was that intervention. I guess as a kid in grade 8, I didn't know, I knew that, like, there's a problem. I just didn't know what, like, remedies to seek. And so luckily there was that external intervention. Things got better until 2016, where my grandmother was killed. As an example, like, you know, she was a victim of femicide, and I think that was another defining period that I'm still recovering from, and has been has defined my relationships and has defined my everything up until this point, you know. But those are probably the two events where yeah, where my mental health required an intervention on my part, and where I realized that I have a problem that I need to intervene on in, and where I realized that I had to do the work.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Thank you so much, Dumi, for that. It was very, very brave of you. And like I said, at a time when a lot of us guys either didn't know that we needed help or didn't even know what the word mental health was. And although this wasn't your burden at all, this wasn't your purpose in life, you somehow shone a light on this issue to a lot of us. And so by the time we started experiencing our own problems, it meant that we could nip it in the bud early enough. So thank you for being so candid and so open with us throughout the years. So I'll start with my experience. The first time I realized I had mental health issues was very late in life. I was 25, I'm still 25. It was incredibly scary because I've been fortunate enough to come from a family that has been generally very accommodating of everything. It was a good, strong family, great parents. I do come from a home of divorce, but one where my parents tried their best to make sure that we did well, were taken care of, and that we felt loved. There was also a space to express ourselves in the family. Moving on to my friendships, generally in my adulthood, I've had very healthy relationships with my male friends. I would say guys like yourself, where I wouldn't say from day one, but from very early on in our friendship, we made it very clear that we want to recalibrate masculinity and we want to recalibrate the way that we relate to each other as men. And that was very important because what it meant is that from about 2015 onwards, chats about mental health were okay, right?
Yeah.
The issue for me, however, is that I was always the friend telling people mental health is important. I was the person tweeting things like, guys, we need to check on our friends. We need to do A, B, and C. So I was very open and I made sure that I created that accommodating environment for all my friends. However, for a very, very long time, I never thought that I was the one that needed help. Simply because nothing traumatic had ever happened in my own life that would have warranted seeking help or would have warranted taking preemptive measures to protect my mental health. And so it was quite scary because, I'm someone who's been practicing meditation for 6 years, someone who generally ate well, took care of themselves, and is very vulnerable with his friends. And then last year, I remember sitting in my apartment after gym, I think leg day might have had something to do with it because all the blood
Yeah, there was no blood in your head, bro.
So last year, after a hectic leg day, I remember getting back to my apartment. I think I was boiling carrots or something like that. And all of a sudden, like instantaneously, this feeling that I've never had in my life before dawns on me. And I can't describe it as anything else, but I felt like in that moment, I thought I was dying, right? And bear in mind, I didn't want to die. It's not that in that moment, I felt like dying. I felt like I was dying, like something beyond my control was happening. And it felt ethereal and out of this world in a very bad way. Not the same as when I'm listening to Lana Del Rey or whatever, but like in a very, very viscerally violent way. In that moment, it felt like my soul was leaving my body. So, so I realized I was having an anxiety attack, right? And an anxiety attack is very different to a panic attack because a panic attack is very rapid, sudden change of breath and all of that stuff. An anxiety attack, the rhythm of your breath is still fine. You're still very much aware of what's going on, but it feels like time has slowed down and it feels like your head just doesn't have anything anymore. It literally feels like you're dying gradually as opposed to rapidly. And so, and while this is happening, I'm in control of my faculties enough to be able to Google, symptoms of anxiety attack. And again, I still feel like I'm dying, but I'm able to read and I'm like, oh, this is what's going on. I'm not dying, but it's an anxiety attack. And that night I had the worst night of sleep of my entire life. I think to this day, that's the worst night of sleep I've ever had. And bear in mind, up until then, I'd never experienced something like that. I'd never experienced insomnia. I'd never experienced a breakout of crying. I'd never experienced a panic attack. But again, I was the friend constantly telling people, take care of your mental health. So I went to the doctor soon after that, just to check if there's something physically wrong with me. And the doctor couldn't find anything. And even he was like, mate, I think you're highly, highly stressed right now. And a lot of patients, that was the first time a doctor introduced me to the idea that a lot of the sicknesses that we have in the modern day time, of course, a lot of them require medication, and I still highly encourage everyone to go to the doctor as soon as you feel sick. So please don't take what I'm saying as an excuse to not go to the doctor. Go to the doctor. So which is why I went to the doctor, despite the fact that I could kind of tell what was wrong. So I went to the doctor, and he told me that the majority of sicknesses that people come to him with nowadays are really linked to the body's reaction to what's going on in the mind, right? And that it's important to go to the doctor. But once you've gone to the doctor, you need to take the next step and go to a different doctor. That's a therapist, a counselor, psychologist, a psychiatrist. Go to a different type of doctor who can help you deal with what's going on in your head, so that your body can now be in tune with the healing that's happening in your mind. And so at that point, Bongani, the guy who used to encourage all his friends to go to therapy and take care of their mental health, was now sitting in front of a therapist, right? I was sitting in front of a therapist for the first time in my life, a scene that I never ever thought would happen in the movie that is my life. And I found myself, talking to my therapist over a number of sessions last year. And as we were talking, my therapist pointed out that the one recurring theme in my life, the thing that causes me the most anxiety, that's caused me the most anxiety throughout my life. Actually, two things pointed this out: sessions with my therapist, conversations with my father, right? Who last year was an absolute rock star when it came to my mental health. He and I had our issues in our relationship before, but last year we had a phenomenal year. And it's so weird because after my anxiety attack, he was one of the first people I called. I don't know why I called him. It was very counterintuitive to call him, but I called him and we met up. So my therapist and my father were incredibly helpful in making me realize that what I was actually struggling with was deep-seated shame, right? And you might think shame, small, it's petty, you can deal with it. No, this is shame that had been recurring in my life over decades, right? And what happens when I experience shame, or when I'm gripped by shame, is that it causes me anxiety, because I'm the firstborn, not only in my family, in my nuclear family, I'm the firstborn in my clan, period, right? I'm the first of my name. I'm Jon Snow, basically. And and my father was the firstborn in his family, firstborn of his name, and his father was the firstborn. So you can imagine the pressure that comes in a patriarchal society that gets passed down from grandfather to father to son, that is linked to shame, right? Oftentimes we call it generational curses, but a generational curse oftentimes isn't this mystical spiritual thing. It's the practical ways that we've been taught to deal with shame and anxiety and depression and all of those things. And so I realized through those conversations that at the core of my anxiety was this deep-seated shame. And the reason why I experienced an anxiety attack last year at that particular time was because a lot of things in my life were unraveling, right? From business to personal relationships, friendships, family, a lot of things were just unraveling. And for the first time in my life, those issues had the potential to spill over into the full view of people who weren't in my immediate circle, right? Because it's one thing that Tammy, Dumi, Busi, and my family know what's going on intimately in my mind. That's fine. And I've always navigated our friendships in a shameless manner. But it's another thing when people who have a specific view of who I am are about to find out that Bongani's life might be falling apart. And when that happened, I think that's what triggered the anxiety attack, because I felt like my shame, the things that I could protect for a very long time, and the things that only you guys knew about, were about to spill over into the full view of everyone else, and that the emperor would be caught naked, basically. So that's been my experience with mental health, is anxiety that was linked to shame. But what I want a lot of the people watching and listening to this to really, really gather from my message is that mental health isn't an aboriginal thing. In other words, it's not, it doesn't exist in your life without cause. It's not, there's always some deep-seated issue that is linked to your mental health. I mean, the human brain is hardwired to respond to crises in different ways, but we all have our very specific narrowed down issues that we can draw down our mental health to and start dealing with those problems. So for me, it was very important that I don't only admit that I was struggling with anxiety, but it was very important for me to find out what it is that triggered my anxiety so that I can deal with that thing very specifically, as opposed to dealing with all of the symptoms of anxiety. Because like I said, I've been meditating for 6 years, I eat well and I take care of myself, but those things are no match for unchecked shame.
Yeah.
Like there are no match for unchecked shame and generational trauma that's been carried by all the firstborns in my family. So that's one thing I'd really like people to gather. To the viewers at home and everyone who's listening, please just give us about 2 minutes. We actually 60 seconds. We'll be back after this very, very short break. We will move on to a couple of other talking points. So please stay with us and we'll be back just now.